So welcome to today's social system mapping on-ramp session for November 14th, 2022. Your hosts today are me, Christine Capra, and Kara Martiner, who is our producer. If you have any technical questions or need anything during the session, feel free to text Kara in the chat. For those of you who are new to this context, and I see a bunch of new faces today, which is really fun. There are, a handful of us who get together just about every Monday, but we always are really thrilled to have new faces. That's like candy for the regulars to discover who else is out there and what they're doing. So just for you people, what this is really essentially it's really about the overall context is this vision about a possibility. The possibility being that social system mapping can help networks and communities that are aimed at system change, some kind of transformation, or some kind of intentionality with some degree of connected, like network intent or existence, for those kinds of groups to become self-organizing more quickly and to become more effective more quickly through social system mapping, which is a specific kind of mapping. So these sessions are a learning opportunity. Today, we're going to hear from Ben Roberts about a map he just recently did. So for those of you who don't know what social system mapping is or haven't seen a social system map, an on-ramp is a great opportunity for you to get introduced to it, to learn more about it. It's also, there's an underlying community of practice related to this exploration. And for that community of practice, hearing what questions and challenges people are bringing to these sessions is really valuable for us, as well as to get to know you and for you to get to know us. Social system mapping is the core of the purpose of this community of practice, but not all of us make social system maps. Some of us use them, and there's a lot of ways a social system map can be part of a community context, and any relationship to that. It's not just about making the maps, but using the maps, introducing the maps, etc. So that's what this is. For today's agenda, we're going to do some quick chats quick intros in the chat in a moment. Ben Roberts is going to share his Bioregional Regeneration Summit networking map. We'll open it up for some questions and answers, where the goal is, especially for the new people, to get your needs met from this session. And then for those of you who would like to, the formal session is designed to be, sorry, I'm talking too fast. I need to slow down. Thank you. Okay. We designed the formal session is designed to be an hour. Those of you that need to jump off at the top of the hour will have a little closing to say goodbye to you. But I'm not sure about Ben, but we'll stick around. Some people will stick around for an extra informal half hour after the hour is over. So if you have more questions, you want to dig deeper, or you just want to ask somebody something about their network, whatever, feel free to stick around for the informal post-session half hour. So let's go ahead and I'm going to stop sharing and let you put into the chat your name, pronoun, location for starters. Thank you, Kara, for putting the prompt in there. And just to say, this is all parts of that are an invitation. There is nothing that happens here is a demand. So if you don't want to put in any part of it, feel free not to. If there's ever an invitation or a suggestion that you just don't want to be involved, don't want to follow up along with, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Being off camera is fine. Eating your breakfast in front of the rest of us, as far as I'm concerned, would be fine. But can't speak for everybody else. So let's see, we have a lot of West Coast, California, and Northwestern Cascadia and Alaska. And then we have some East Coast, Connecticut and Massachusetts, Ithaca. Oh, we have someone from Germany. Welcome. We have a London person. Yay. Kara and I are in the middle of the northern part of the United States. So we're in Minnesota, where it has finally started snowing. Connecticut. Cool. Next question. What's one primary network that you are part of or working with? Odds are you wouldn't be here if you didn't have some kind of network connection, community, something. And Denise is from Ontario, from Toronto. Got quite a range, at least on the North American continent. Kentucky. Focus theory today, Jim.
That was a typo.
Oh, I was like, okay, this is a new one on me. That's or maybe now Jim is just putting in what's up for him this week, so, which is fine too. Okay. Oh, Paula from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. Interesting. We've been working with Sarah Raffo, who's a graphic designer, who's been doing some design work to help us visualize the theory of social system mapping change.
Very cool. Yeah, I'm new to the program, so I'm just starting and I don't know Sarah, but I hope I'll get to meet her.
Yeah, cool. Okay. Thank you for that. And then I had one last question, which is what brings you here today? So I'm seeing social justice, violence, no, anti-violence, climate, systems thinking, food systems, lots of large-scale systemic challenges that we're all grappling with. And so thank you all. I just want to acknowledge all what it takes to be working in these large scale system change areas. Appreciate everyone's work and just the heart that it takes. And cool. Okay. So, Ben, I'm trusting that you're seeing the comments for why people are showing up. And if you, and maybe you're not, and that's fine too, but I was just thinking that might help guide your directionality of what you want to, if you see anything that this helps you reference or your points, you know what I'm saying. I'm a little inarticulate all of a sudden. Okay, so having on that, thank you all for all of that. And I'm going to go ahead and, I'm sharing my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks. So for those of you who are not familiar with how a social system map, like the core of how it works, there's a very simple underlying set of relationships that it's really useful for you to understand in order to get how we do this. And so there's essentially two totally different software programs that we use to create a social system map. One is Kumu. Kumu is a data visualization. It's a graph visualization tool, which is available to anybody online, and public maps in Kumu are free. So you can have set up an account, create as many free maps as you want, public maps as you want for free, no cost. And by graph visualization, what I mean is that it is designed to show dots and line, like anything that you can connect, data that can be represented as a dot and a line. So one type of entity connected to another type of entity, whether it's people or ideas or causal loops in a system, that's a graph. And Kumu is a really lovely sort of state-of-the-art graph visualization tool that enables you to make graphs and make those graphs very interactive with lots of filtering and lots of information about the dots when you click on a dot, very interactive and accessible. So Kumu is the data visualization tool that we use. And for the kind of data that we want to represent in a social system map, we have developed, and this is where I come in, my partner and I have developed this tool called SumMap, which is designed to gather the data, the kinds of data in a social, around a social system, easily make it in a user-friendly way that's very highly customizable, so that gets at the kind of data that you're looking for and is user-friendly for an administrator to set up, as well as user-friendly for end users to interact with, to share the data about the dynamics of the social system. So SumApp gathers the data is fed from SumApp into Kumu live. You can put a live link from SumApp into Kumu so that as your data is being updated, it's automatically going right into the map live. And then from Kumu, we take what's called an embed of the Kumu map and plunk it back into SumApp in a separate tab, so that what you have is within SumApp an interface that feels and looks pretty seamless to your end users. They can access the map on one tab, they can go add more data about their relationships or about themselves in another tab, so they can easily go back and forth between the different components of this project, without having to know that without him having to have a Kumu account, and without even having to know that there's a separate platform that's involved. But because it looks seamless to the end user, it can be confusing, and so that's why I sort of spell this out for you up front, so you know that we're working with two tools, and have the fundamental sense of what's going on. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to our very creative, adventurous, prolific member of our community, map creator, Ben Roberts, who is going to share one of his recent maps with us. I'm going to stop my sharing and just say thank you to Ben a lot and hand it over, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Christine.
Mhm.
Hello, everybody. Happy to share this map with you all today. There's a lot there and more coming that I can't show you because we haven't mapped it yet. But remind me again, how much time is the presentation piece supposed to take, Christine? Like 15 minutes or so?
15 minutes to a half hour. We just want to give people time. So if we aim at being done like roughly 20 to the hour.
Okay. And I guess feel free to, pop in with a question or clarification in the middle, rather than just wait until I'm done. I may or may not be tracking the chat closely. So if you want to just pipe up, that's fine, but maybe somebody else will look at the chat. Anyway, yeah, I've been doing a lot of these maps going all the way back to 2019, I think, when Jim Best helped me create a map for the Now What Global Gathering that ran for 7 different editions over the years. And actually this fall was the first time we didn't do Now What, because this event that I'm going to show you kind of replaced it, at least in my calendar and my energies. And they do share a similarity in that these are maps related to events as opposed to, say, a community or a network, although both of these events also were tied to and in a way kind of helped to launch communities or networks. But it's kind of an inversion in some ways of how one might normally think about using a tool like this. And I think with that, maybe I'll just start sharing my screen here. Maybe first give you just a little bit of background on the event itself. So I'm a member of the Global Council of this entity, the Regenerative Communities Network, which was formed back in 2018 by the Capital Institute and then became an independent project about not quite 2 years ago, which is when I got actively involved at the global level. And the network decided to put on a summit that ran from October 24th through November 4th, so just completed 2 weeks ago. as kind of the first thing that it did after becoming independent from the Capital Institute and kind of reorganizing. And it's a network of collaboratives at the bioregional scale. We could go into the definitions of that, but it's probably not super relevant. But there was a global network of 15 of these different bioregions, and then lots of different people that are interested in this idea of how we do regeneration bioregionally, how we transform our food, water, energy, governance, relationships, neighborhoods, everything into something that can get us onto a track towards a world that works for all, or that helps us adapt to the collapse and the breakdowns that we're experiencing. So what we're looking at here actually is a platform called KikoChat that we use to organize the event. There's kind of an open circle space, and then there's an interactive space that links a bunch of Zoom lines together. Also not really what you need to know, but I wanted to show you one thing here that was part of our, well, this was our calling question. What opportunities are emerging for radical collaboration in support of bioregional regeneration. So we really wanted this summit to support new efforts to collaborate, how networks can collaborate with each other, how different bioregional groups can learn and support one another, how we can innovate new ways to do funding, how we can support one another individually in collaborative ways. And this is what I wanted to show you. I'm not sure how I can make it a little bit bigger. But we wanted this summit to have three different dimensions to it. So open Zoom calls, kind of the standard way that one might do things, as well as some in-person meetings. We had about 120 of these over 2 weeks. We used this KikoChat platform for asynchronous connecting, as well as the map that I'm going to show you and other things. We also wanted this third dimension, that there would be self-organized conversations happening, that people would connect with each other in different ways, sort of sort themselves out around what they were interested in, and organize small group conversations that were, really focus on what they're interested in, the kind of people they want to meet with, the languages they want to speak, the schedules that work for them, etc. And so that was one of the main reasons we decided actually to make this map, was to have a tool to start doing that self-organizing. That is, otherwise, if you've got, we had 1,000 people register for the summit, and for them to figure out who to meet is a tricky thing without a tool like this. This is again KikoChat. This is the event space. These are all different Zoom lines that we had, and the map was embedded up here inside of KikoChat, but which is kind of a shell that lets you plug all these different things together. But I'm going to just take us directly to the map here and look at it. We'll also look at how the data was collected a little bit, and sort of take you through the history of that. But I think it's probably better to just start with the map itself, and talk about it. So this is what in some app speak is known as a dual entity map, meaning that there are two separate database tables that are integrated into one map. And here you can see that the orange circles are people and the blue squares are partners. So those are each in separate database tables, which means you can have different surveys for the profiles of each of them. So every one of these has some kind of a profile tied to it that may or may not have a lot of information on it. Let's see if we can find one that does.
And Ben,
Yeah.
by partners, you mean some group that isn't an individual. You don't mean like partners like buddies or.
Right. So when people registered for this, they registered as individuals, but they were also asked, is there some kind of a group or an initiative that you would like to have be a partner in the summit? And what that meant was they were committing to helping to share the invitation for the summit. They were going to pay attention to this map and see if people got interested in them. So one of the things you can do in the map here, I just clicked the little focus button here. Now we're looking at this particular organization, OPEPA, and we're seeing some data about people either who are connected with it. And here's Luis, who's in an active role as the founder of OPEPA. OPEPA is part of the Weaving Lab and the Regenerative Communities Network's Columbia node, as well as this is the network that convened the summit. And here are two people that said they were interested in OPEPA, and we can actually pick up the data from the connections they drew. So this is how we were using some app to start developing this kind of collaborative what's the word, to use it as an infrastructure for collaboration. All right, so here's Juan Sebastian Cardenas Salas saying, I'm following you, I participate in your events, and I have a specific invitation or request. I want to collaborate or join. And it's up now to Luis and Opepa to notice this data and follow up on it. Joe Colhane similarly saying that he wants to collaborate or join. And these are kind of check boxes that people can check off when they're creating a connection inside some app to a partner or to a person. So we go back out here, clear the focus. We had that kind of data collected for people as well as for the partners. What we didn't do that's kind of unique to, or probably at least the first time I didn't do it did this way or didn't do it, we didn't say, show us all the connections you already have to the different people that are here or the organizations. Well, with the organizations we did. We wanted to know who was in the lead or active in a given organization. But most of the lines you see here are people saying they want to make connections during the summit or beyond it. As we figured, we really wanted that to be the main focus of the tool. We also felt that it was pretty likely that we were very, very well connected here. And so we didn't necessarily need to prioritize visualizing that. And for that matter, most people, when they registered, were giving us their email address, or often, we'd get their LinkedIn profile too. Let's keep clicking around, and as well as often quite a bit more information about themselves. So let me just show you a little bit more about what's in the map, and then I can show you the back end and how the data was collected. But again, most of the lines you see here are people either saying they want to connect, or we're also seeing appreciations. That's another thing that we did here. So the blue lines means there's some kind of appreciation. If it's a solid line, there was some kind of invitation for involved as well. And the dashed lines would just be an appreciation or some kind of data about how people connected. So for example, Annalika to Kareem, saying they had a connection, but she's naming gifts that she received. So this is the appreciation part, and that she wants to connect further, I think is what that was implying. Sometimes it's not always perfectly clear. These little surveys are completely customizable inside of some app. So here's Annalika saying she wants to dance with Melina, and a little note about how she enjoyed being together. I actually think at this point I'd like to create a view, and this is something Kumu is very good at, is very flexibly creating multiple views for the data. It'd be nice to see a view that just showed the appreciations, for example. And I'd hope to get a little bit more of this data into this, as you might imagine with an event with 120 Zoom calls, people were just kind of caught up in whatever they could participate in. Collecting data as the event goes on and afterwards, is sometimes a challenge. And so we're seeing only a tiny fraction, I think, of what actually happened. Someone have a question? No, okay. So this is the invitations and appreciations view. And let me just go through quickly some of the other views that we have. So one of the nice features in Kumu is that you can overlay the data onto a geographic map. So here we're seeing for the people that provided that data, where they're located at the zip code level. And if you don't provide any data, you get placed in the Gulf of Guinea, which is the 0 degrees longitude and latitude location. I only learned that because of this tool. There's a lot of people right there. And what else? This was a different thing I did this time around. I've often asked people in their profiles if there were, gifts that they were bringing to a gathering or a conversation they wanted to have or a resource they wanted to offer. And I created a view to just highlight those things. So the coding is that if there's a purple circle, there's a conversation someone wants to have. The green dot in the center means there's a resource. A triangle means there's a gift. In some cases, we may have gotten all three of those, right? Here's somebody. Susanna, and you can scroll down here and you can see her gift is courage, imagination, and grit. Wow, there's a potent combination. Identifying conversations she wants to have around medicinal and aromatic plants, sustainable packaging. Isn't there somebody on this call interested in sustainable packaging? This data is public, so I'll drop the link in the chat and maybe you want to follow up with Susanna. And then resources are in here somewhere too, I think, right? Maybe she didn't have a resource. In any case, I think one of the things to note about what's going on here is just the incredible richness and depth of the data people will provide you for this mapping. And then, the question becomes, how do you work with that effectively? And you can leave it up to everybody who showed up to wander through the map and look at all this information. And as you can imagine, I think, only a small percentage of people will do that. And so one of the other things we're doing as an experiment here in people's profile, we asked them if they were interested in becoming part of a weaving team. This comes out of the concept of network weaving, pioneered by June Hawley and many other people, with the notion that there's a particular role for people who want to be connectors in a space like this. And so when people identified that, they could say either two things, that they're ready to weave. So we got a bunch of those folks who just said, yes, I'm ready to do it. And some folks said they'd like to know more. Altogether, this is over 70 people out of the 1,000 who said this. And it's interesting to note too, they had to go to a second stage of updating their profiles beyond their registration. I'll show you the registration in a minute, but when you register, we got a basic set of profile information, including, email and LinkedIn, if you wanted to do that, and a little sort of tweet length bit of text about yourself. So we got you on the map with some basic stuff, but then we asked some more questions for people that really wanted to go deep, and this was one of them. And so the idea is that these weavers are now hopefully a resource of people who are really going to dig into the map, among other things, and start to look for where, what's the learning we can pull out of this? Where are the opportunities to explore further as an emerging community practice? What kinds of connections they might make? And one of the core tasks I've given these folks is to try to organize those small group conversations. Right, going back to this thing, these self-organized conversations. So they didn't happen during the 2 weeks of the summit, but now we've got time. We want to do another summit in 6 months, and between now and then, we're hoping to generate a lot of these self-organized conversations and look to these weavers to be doing a lot of that. And you can see there, well, I don't know what to say that you can see, but actually I did another view too. I didn't link it over here in the sidebar, but I decided let's to see where they are geographically as well. And that's kind of an interesting thing. A lot of them are in the Gulf of Guinea, of course. But you can zoom into any particular area and see, there's a cluster of people and there's a weaver there, right? So at least this is a fairly big geography between Kenya and Uganda and Rwanda, but still, close enough that maybe this person wants to connect and reach out to some of those people. Probably other areas where it's a little more densely concentrated. We had a very big Latin American contingent because of so a lot of the nodes within the Regenerative Communities Network that hosted this are based in Costa Rica and Colombia and Mexico. And so you can see some real density there and a lot of potential, I think, for weaving and activation in those areas. Yeah, let me just show you a little bit of the back end on how we collected all this data. So we actually had people register using a Google form. And there was a Spanish version of that as well, about not quite 200 out of the 1,000 people who registered in Spanish. And so we asked people, just some fairly basic questions, including, did you want to be on the map or not? And I think about 80% said that they did. And then if they did say that, there were a bunch of questions that were fed right into their profile. So we got the location information, if they wanted their email address to be public, personal website, LinkedIn, other social media, other contact, work. That was it. Oh, and then this little sentence about their work and why they're here, as well as I think there's a shorter version of that too that we got somewhere. Yeah, this little 140 character tweet. And then later there was a right. Okay. Then that would after that, they would get a link into SumApp. So here we are seeing SumApp, where you can also view the map as Christine was saying. And we uploaded all the data from that form directly into SumApp. And then they later could come in and put in a picture and add more to their profile. So there was a set of questions that were not included in that registration survey. For example, oh, I didn't show you this stuff. This is kind of fun. What languages people might want to have conversations in. Not just, so we don't just default to English, roles they play within the field of bioregional regeneration, some things related to the summit. This is where we got those conversations and the gifts and the resource data, whether they wanted to join the weaving team. And then here were the questions from their registration, so they could go back in and update those. Yeah, and some of these, let me just go back to Kumu for a second and show you. Let's go to the weaving interest view. So you can sort this data based on some of what we saw. So we could just look at people, for example, and take out the partners for a second and say, we want to know who are the Spanish speakers who are interested in how we can support our emotional, physical, and spiritual resilience as individuals. These were the 4 kind of main themes of the summit. So we can do those folks, and maybe we want to look for the people that are doing art making related to that. And now we have this little cluster. So when we talk about, what are the conversations we want to organize going forth, or where's the collaboration potential? You're now, getting down to a fairly nice size cohort of people that might be very interested in having further conversations based on those shared interests. And 4 of them said they were ready to weave. 2 of them said they wanted to know more about weaving. One of them is one of the lead organizers in the summit, my colleague Melina. And you can tell these are artists. Right? So yeah, I just wanted to show you that. And was there one other thing? Maybe that's enough to pause. I'm thinking there was something else, but I'm just going to stop for a moment. I know that was a whole lot to take in. Oh, I was just going to name that there is this other bit of data we're now collecting but haven't mapped yet, that are basically invitations to collaborate, opportunities that people want to explore around bioregional regeneration. We've got about 15 of those so far, again, collecting those using a Google form, and we'll be uploading those onto the map. So that'll be a different entity, like I think they're going to be, what did we say, green diamonds, something like that. And there'll be a separate view on that. And then in the same way that people could draw connections, which I didn't show you how that works in some app. We could look at that if you want. But the same way that you could draw a connection to a person or a partner saying, I'd like to know more or be connected to you or want to collaborate, you could do that with an opportunity exploration too, and say, I want to learn more, I want to play with you. And the people that who've put those into the map can then go and easily view that data.
That was amazing. That's quite the map.
It really helped people in a virtual event like this too, to because over 120 Zoom calls, as you can imagine, people were spread out all over the place. And we had 100 people in one of our opening plenaries. After that, maybe you might see 20 to 30 people in a well-attended call, maybe 50. Some of the calls might have 2 or 3 or 5 people in them. And so getting a sense of the whole was really important, as well as the fact that not all the people who registered, right, are going to even show up. But if they're on that map, we still can work with that, right? There's still a larger field that we're plugging into. And particularly because we want to do this again and we want to support some collaboration between now and the next summit, I'm hoping this is going to be a really potent resource.
Great. Thanks. That was really great. So yeah, I saw a bunch of you put your hands up. Feel free to go ahead and put them back up again. And if you want to either put your questions in the chat and we'll go through them, or put your hands up and we'll just do our best to take things in order. And I will wrap us up with the conversation at like 2 minutes to the top of the hour, so we can do our closing ritual. And just know that if you want to stick around, we'll be here. Ben, are you sticking around for the extra half hour?
I can stick around, yeah. And if anybody wants to see how those lines get drawn, I'm happy to show that. I did see a hand was up a second ago, but I know I kind of left out that one kind of basic piece of how all this works.
Sure.
Are you nodding, Cindy? I see thumbs up from Justin. All right, let me do that one quickly as well. Okay, back here. So when when you opted into being on the map, you got your own personal link to SumApp, which is this whole interface here. Really elegant and well designed, and kind of your one-stop shop. In fact, it because this is a dual entity map, if you put in a partner, one of those blue squares, as well as yourself, they're tied in with the same email address, and so you can actually access your partner's profile or partner entity profile as well as yourself, which is a nice thing. And the map is there. But what I wanted to show you were these two tabs. So here's how you can show connections to people. And so all 800 some odd people who are on this map have little tabs and tiles here. You can search by name. You can also say, show me how they got here. So I want to just find the people who registered in Spanish and opted into being on the map. I can just pull them up. And then you can pick one of the questions from the profile survey and make that a filter. So here's that one we looked at where you could say, show me all the people interested in art making. And then for any one of these, you click on them, and then this is a customizable little survey for person-to-person connections inside of SumApp. We put a lot of text in here, including having it in Spanish and English, and explaining to people, how come we're not asking who you're already connected to, which is a lot of what that is. And then it had these two main sections: connections you wanted to make during the summit, which should now say and beyond. So this is where people said, these different options. Wanted to have a one-on-one conversation, organize a small group, learn more about their work, explore collaborating, have an invitation. You could say more about that than here. And then we encourage people to actually reach out directly in addition to drawing this line on the map, because at the moment when you do that, it doesn't create a notification, right? The fact that I showed a connection to Uhuru did not mean that SumApp or Kumu sent Uhuru some kind of message. So if I don't do anything else, she's got to go to the map and see that I'm pointing to her and click on that link to see this data. But we put that in there to encourage more connecting. And then here was this other thing where we showed the appreciations and whether people met for the first time, deepened a relationship, learned about one another, and then where you could share a little bit about gifts you receive. So that's one survey. That's for people to people. Here's people to partners. And when we put the opportunity explorations in, that's also going to be here. So now we're looking at all, not quite 200 of those partners. And you can say something about whether you have an existing connection or you want to make a connection. These folks is interesting. They've been meeting for 40 years. It's like one of the original bioregioning groups. Every year they've had a gathering in the Ozarks and nobody even knew, at least that I had talked to. And they showed up like saying, how come you all aren't featuring us? I said, well, maybe next time. And then there's there's the third kind of connection too, which is partner to partner, which we didn't use much, but you could say whether these partners are collaborating, tracking each other's work, sharing invitations, want to do more to connect, took any action. So it's like there's so much potential in these tools. We're still just barely scratching the surface of how to really activate what we've got.
Yeah, Ben, so I'm seeing a handful of questions related to the using of the Google form for registration versus the just using, because I know in the past you've just used the SumApp profile as your the opt-in form as your registration form, and there's a number of questions getting at that from different angles. Why did you choose to use a Google form as the first step this time around?
Yeah, well, and that relates to this question about the partner data. So one of the things we did in the Google form is we said, do you want to add a partner too? Mm-hmm. And if they said yes, then we collected enough basic information to put the partners on in addition to people. The other reason we did it that way, well, it allowed us to fork the Spanish language registrations and the English more easily. That was another consideration. We wanted to make sure we got certain basic data from people, I think, and it's also it's a little bit. Oh, here was another thing. You saw the Kiko chat platform we were using for the event. So we had that directly linked through Zapier, so that which is another little tool, so that when you registered on that Google form, you automatically got registered into Kiko chat too. And I know how to do that with a Google form and KikoChat. It may be possible with some app also to create a Zap that would do that with that data, but I don't know how to do that. And I have a feeling that the KikoChat folks don't either. So that was another thing, that we were using the data from that form to go in two different directions.
That's helpful. Which is anybody who had that question have anything remaining? I mean, like, is there any more unpacking of the question about the relationship between the Google form and some app before we open it up to other types of questions, since we're still on that topic? Vicky?
Yeah, I want to know if there were any translation problems. Was it pretty clean, taking the Google form data and putting it into some app?
Pretty clean, especially once we learned a little trick along the way around accent marks in text. So we were using, if you go straight from a Google form into a CSV file to upload into some app, there's something wonky that happens there. So we learned that you have to first go to an Excel format and then create the CSV file, and then all that works. We had somebody doing a lot of labor on the back end to do the uploading, because these things were constantly coming in, right? We probably had, I don't know, 300 or 400 registrants on October 24th when the summit started, and 1,000 or by the time we were done. So there was a person doing that on a regular basis. There's some other little nuances to that process. And that is a reason why, it was a tough choice whether to just use some app's own registration tool, as a way to do this. It would have meant much less labor for Lauren on the back end, who was doing all that data entry, and simplified certain things, and we wouldn't have had the issue with the accent marks and stuff too. But mostly it worked very well. I mean, she, for those 1,000 people plus the 200 partners, I think she put in about 40 hours of work, something like that, maybe a little less.
And then there's a question about not showing, why you didn't show the existing connection, why you didn't ask about existing connections and show them, which for those of you who are new to this, normally, like the usual approach is to be asking about who do you already know and how well do you know them, and then you might ask an additional question about who do you want to work with or get to know better or work with more. And Ben just did the second one, which was really interesting. And so can you say more about that?
Yeah. I think it would have been messy. I mean, you can filter out the data. So we didn't, just because we collected that information, didn't mean we'd have to show it. But if somebody like me, I probably knew or had some connection to at least 200 of those 1,000 people, right? And so it's a lot of work to put that information in, and it also makes the map look a certain way because of Kumu's algorithms in terms of how it distributes people. And so one of the things that was really quite cool was that in the beginning there were no connections when we first just uploaded the data, and everybody was in this sort of perfect kind of circle with a fairly empty space in the middle. Like Kumu spread everybody out a bit to the periphery, and then as people started drawing connections, they would start being displayed in the center of the map. And to me, the metaphor was like at a dance, where it starts out and everybody's standing around at the wall, and then bit by bit, people start moving into the center and dancing with each other. And that was really, in a sense, what the map was doing, and it made that visible in a very cool way. You could see who's really engaged in this space, who's really showing up and wanting to play, versus who's just put themselves on the map, and maybe they're super connected, but they might not have even come to a call or paid much attention to things. So it really highlighted the process of connecting. That was the purpose. Plus, we're all so connected already that it just didn't seem to me that from a functional perspective, it was going to do a lot for us. If I needed to meet anybody on that map, I'm pretty sure I could have, I could do so fairly. Maybe there's a few people who didn't put any connecting information in, but I think they're pretty few and far between. Yeah.
So Cindy has a question. She's got two questions. Cindy, the one about the partners registering, has that one been answered for you, or do you want to amplify that?
It's the same form.
Yeah.
So on the form, there was a question, do you want to add a partner? And if you said yes, then you'd be taken to a portion of the registration form for that data.
Okay. Then she also had another question about, if you were to do the next summit, would you just continue adding to the current one? And would you use the same form, or would you start a whole new map?
I think we'll use the same one. We probably use a different registration form. I don't know actually, but we'd like to keep the data. There is a bit of a challenge because when you get a lot of data in these things, it starts to get very slow. A lot of that's the connecting data. So if with this approach of not mapping all the connections, we might have a little more capacity to have more nodes on the map, more circles and squares and things. But it is a question, like if we could, if we wanted to have 10,000 people participate in the next summit, we probably could do that. This thing was pretty successful and we did it on kind of a shoestring, people just working really hard over a few weeks to pull it together in the end. So with 6 months lead time, we could make it much bigger, and then we'd probably be hitting the limits on the capacity of these tools, and we'd have to figure out what to do around that. It's a good problem to have.
Yeah, and just to add, just from a technical perspective, I don't know if you know this yet, Ben, but we have a limit in some app of 1,500 members per project, and that we put that there in the beginning because that was about the edge of what Kumu could handle, and we didn't want people to just start loading 10,000 people and thinking that was going to work. It was kind of like, no, we're just going to put it within Kumu's capacity. Kumu has gotten faster, and if you know what you're doing and can be fairly sophisticated about how you do your views and stuff, you can push Kumu's limits. And so there's still a max of 1,500 in some app, but you can contact me and increase your subscription a little bit and increase the maximum. So I can set the maximum higher if needed, but that's not just a publicly available thing, because we still want to sort of make sure people are clear about the limits before we make it possible to add more.
So let's push those limits next time.
Yeah.
I love a messy experiment.
Yes. Other questions, other comments that feel free to just unmute yourself. Oh, Denise, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Ben, that was amazing. It was really, really interesting to watch, and it made me start thinking about a conference we're going to do and how to introduce the map. So my question was, how well versed was the participants beforehand in network mapping? And did you include within the summit, like just a discussion on kind of like what we're doing, like just network mapping, what it can do to kind of help the people along who are going to become the network weavers, to encourage people to continue to use the map afterwards? Or was that really not part of like the kind of agenda? I just thought it was a great idea, but I was just wondering how many people might have been like, what am I doing? What am I signing up for? And, oh, I've signed up for it and it's done. And from our conversations, we're trying to get people to always use these maps beyond the one moment. But this was really an interesting way to do the mapping. So that's what I was curious about. Thanks.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah.
I think most people were probably new to this, or maybe they'd seen some maps but weren't necessarily sophisticated users. So I created some short videos that are actually linked to on the sidebar of the map, and we emailed those out and tried to make that generally available to people, which gets you to a certain point, but of course lots of people won't watch those. I think people got into it. They played, they learned. I mean, all those connections were people that obviously got in there and used the tool. But we don't have any way to actually capture the data on what percentage of them. Well, we know how many people went, I guess, and added more data. We could probably figure that out, because there was the 2-part thing where you had some of the data in the Google form when you registered, and then some data only when you went back to add more to your profile. So in some sense, it was a decent percentage. And I think that Weaver role is still going to be key. I think there's always going to be, only a small subset that really want to dig in, and there's so much there. I mean, that's the other thing, there's just such a richness of data that people are willing to provide, and these tools are so good at capturing it that it's worth having a group of people really spend that time. And yeah, there was a question about any live support. We had regular hangout sessions, we called them, during the course of the summit. There were probably, I don't know, 20 of them, something like that. And what we would do in those is anybody who had technical questions about the map or any other aspect of the summit, we would talk about those in the main room on that Zoom line, and then we had breakouts where people could go and have other conversations. But I was always available to show people the map and different things like that. Haven't trained the weavers yet. We were just kind of barely keeping our heads above water with all the stuff that was going on and emerging over the course of it. So I didn't even send an email out to the weavers until after the summit had closed saying, hey, are you still interested? Because there's a lot to work with. And so we'll see how that happens, how that
You should invite them to these community practices.
Yeah, right.
No, thanks.
Yeah. Jim.
Ben, I had a question in there. Just it was, you kind of answered it. How well do you think the participants use the map? You talked about it in terms of adding more data, but do you think people came back to the map looking at connections and or is that going to come out in the next phase, the self-organized phase?
I think it's a mix. I think a lot of people, haven't done it, and we're going to keep suggesting to them that they do. I hope that the partners at least all do that, because a lot of them did get expressions of interest from people, and that was part of what we asked them to commit to as partners, was to look at the map and follow up with those folks. So I'm going to nudge them again on that score. And I think it's also just part of what I'm learning about the difference between these sort of intensive kind of compressed gatherings and what we can do to collaborate when we have more time and space to do so. So a lot of that just isn't, there was so much going on and people were just participating in as much as they could that was live at the time. And so I think it's natural that tools like this, the asynchronous space, gets used more, in the space between the big, intense, exciting gatherings.
Ben, did you see, so Bruno had a question about how did you design both the views of the map and the survey of the map? Did you do that alone, or did you have a team doing that? Did you do it on your own? What was the effort of that like?
There were 4 of us on the core team. Melina, who you saw, a woman named Isabel Carlisle, and Devin, and then Lauren Minnis, who I mentioned, who was doing a lot of the data entry in the back. And so I think all of them had eyes on what I was creating and gave me feedback. And as I said, we were pretty much just maxed out capacity wise, pulling this thing together over a period of about 6 weeks, really, before, prior to October 24th. And so we had to just divide up a lot of the work. And I was the only one that had the experience and the skills with this stuff. And they were, I don't know, they trusted me, for better or worse. And I think, it's great if it can be a collaborative effort to design these things, because you're constantly faced with all kinds of questions about what do we ask and how do we ask it and what are the options for the answers, and then how do we display that data. So there's, it's definitely a richer process when it's collaborative rather than one person's, mad scientist vision of things. And so for the next edition of the summit, I think hopefully we'll have more of a team doing that. Let me know.
So I think we have time for one more before we do our formal close, and then hopefully whoever still has questions can stick around. But so Vanessa wants to know a little bit more about the difference of use between the individuals and the partnering organizations. Vanessa, does that express it well enough, or do you want to add any? Okay.
You mean in how they have used the map or would use the map?
Yeah, I guess it's because when I was first introduced to like Kumu and this kind of network mapping, it was always based on individuals.
Mm-hmm.
But the situation that I need to use it in is usually more about organizations and not about individuals. So I'm just like curious about the pluses and minuses or pros and cons sort of around that orientation. And this is the first time I've seen one where there was data on both individuals and organizations.
Which is one of the really special things about some app as software, right? First of all, that you can have anybody who's on the map draw those lines at all is pretty magical, right? Rather, because it's not, you can collect profile data and map that in Kumu. That's not, there's other ways to do that. But to have people be able to see those tiles and say, oh, sort through them and say, oh, this person, I want to meet them, or I know them, etc., or a partner. That's kind of the secret, the special superpower of this tool, or among them. And then that, when you have both entities, people and organizations, then you've got those three different types of connections, right? People to people, people to organizations, organization to organization. So you really can get very sophisticated about what you're showing. As I was saying before, I think I'm still just kind of figuring out the best ways to use that data. But it was very exciting to see almost 200 organizations show up, especially because our goal is to support radical collaboration, to say we're at a point where if we really want to see systemic change, organizations devoted to that need to start playing with each other a lot in a lot more creative ways. And we have tools to do it, and we have social technologies to do it, and we just need to do it more and stop complaining that not enough is happening. I also think a lot more is happening than we can visualize, which might be another way these maps can help us to see, oh, wow, look at that. They're already connected in different ways. But I'm gonna have us, so for those of you who need to get off, so we're at the top of the hour, so we just have a little closing ritual, which is just to say goodbye to those who need to leave. So I'm going to count to what I'm going to invite you to do is everyone, whether you're sticking around or not, unmute if you want to do this. I'm going to count down 3, 2, 1 in just a second, and when we get to 1, we just all give each other our blessings, our greetings, our well wishes and love for the rest of your day. And then who needs to jump off jumps off, and then if you want to stick around and have further conversation, please do so. So ready, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
Bye. You have a great
Yeah.
week.
Yeah.
Okay,
Both of those.
bye. And then we'll just wait for a moment until everyone who's leaving has found the place to click themselves out and give it a minute to settle. Wow. We had a lot of, this was a fairly robust attendance with lots of both new people and people who come all the time and middle people. And so this is really fun. And all right, so we have another half hour, and feel free to now just don't feel like you have to put it in the chat. I think maybe there's few enough of us that we can, go ahead, Vanessa. Yeah.
Yeah, could I do a follow-up, Ben, on my original question about individuals and organizations? Because did you distinguish, did people put themselves in as individuals if they weren't organizationally affiliated, or was it kind of both and? So, and there's a kind of complication between saying like, I'm an individual attached to a partnering organization, or I'm a freestanding individual. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so it was what you just said. You could put yourself in as an individual. You could also add one or more partner organizations, although our registration form only allowed you to do one. So if you wanted to put more than one in, you had to email us and say you wanted to do that. And then once you did that, actually you'd have to go in separately, or we could have done it on the back end, I guess, if I wanted to ask Lauren to, and make the connection between the person and the organization. So
I just remembered about the arrow.
Could be
That's
on
right.
as a person. You could have just an organization on. I don't know if anybody put an organization on who hadn't also registered for the summit, but you didn't have to be on the map. So I guess technically you could have not been on as a person and just had your organization there. That was possible. You could have yourself as a person and your organization and show them as connected, or not have shown them as connected. I think most of those partners probably didn't have that connection data drawn necessarily, but we could, if we wanted to encourage people to paint a fuller picture, we could nudge them. And we actually have the data. We don't know the nature of that connection, but we at least know the person who put that on the map. So we could go back in and draw that line ourselves if we wanted to.
Ben, I just want to clarify one thing. When you said if they put an organization in their form, you went into the back end and then you made that connection. You just said that, but I think what you
So I
meant
said we
was
could do that. We did.
you linked them by email if they put an organization in. You're not putting the map. You said you connected them, and there's like a couple ways that could have happened, and I was hoping that we could clarify that.
Sure. So if when you registered, you said, I also want to add a partner.
Mhm.
We uploaded the partner as well as you into some app and upload into Kumu. And we would use the same email that you used to register for the partner as well as you, which meant that in your some app dashboard, you could control the profile for both. What we didn't do is actually go into the person to partner, tiles and show that that person was connected to that partner, which would generate an actual line on the map. That was up to individual people to do. We have the data because it was the same registration form where you gave us both. So we could say, there's a connection there. We wouldn't know the nature of the connection necessarily, but we didn't do that. We left that up to individuals to do. Some did, some didn't.
Yeah, that's what I was just wanting to clarify is in some app is designed for dual elements, which is what you're asking for. So this is totally contingent upon this tool, which is the only tool that does this, that will enable you to have a separate survey for both element types plus the 3 connection types. So that's a some app design. And so what Ben is saying is an organization can be functionally in the back end linked to an individual so that that individual has access to both their profiles at once when they go in. But that's not the same as, that has nothing to do with what shows on the map. The links on the map are created by the individuals who are representing the organizations. So it's a functional connection that he made, not a visual connection. They still have to do that part. So they're still defining their connections.
If you want, I can take 30 seconds to just show you that on the back end, but maybe it's clear.
I see one head nodding.
A thumbs up from
Another head nodding.
All right, let me quickly do that. It's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward. Okay, so here we are. This is me. This is the partner entity that I put on, the Thriving Resilient Communities Collaboratory. But if we go back to me as a person, this is how I would do it. So I can go as a person to all of the different partners that were put in, right? I can look for that one, select it, and check off that I'm in a lead role, right? So this is what I have to do proactively as a person in order to create a line on the map. But the fact that both of these are here, so I can go into the profile of the TRCC and upload this image and say a little bit about it and say more about it here. That came from the fact that the same email linked these two in the SumApp database. So when I registered, I said, I want to put this partner on as well. And so I got a single link that connected both of these. But on the map, they're only going to be linked. Oh, I got to undo all the, sorry, hold on. Let's go to this view. On the map, there's only going to be a line between them. Reindex here. This is where we're getting into the limits of my computer plus Kumu. It's going to take it a second, but you can see these purple lines here. These are people connected to organizations in some kind of a functional role, right? He said, it's part of this initiative. It's because he said he's part of it or he's in a lead role. That's why it's purple. So that's what Kumu can do. Here's someone who's part of it and in a lead role. Probably should have made it so you only could get one of those. So if you want a purple arrow on there, you got to go into the back end and do that little survey thing that I did, over here.
So Cindy, Vicky, I see that your hand's up. I just want to see if anyone, if what Ben just showed is clear. Vicky, is your topic a new topic or is it related to that? The dual elements? You're not.
Sort of, sort of related.
Let's just, did what Ben just showed, is that clear enough to everybody for us to move to a sort of topic? Are we good enough? Okay, go ahead, Vicky.
Yeah, so I have been interested in more depth on the relationships. I mean, I think you go into these And even the way this one, your map is set up is you go in as an individual and then you start adding all your data about who you are and what you're offering. And then there's a focus, the addition of the relationship seems to be kind of another step and an invitation. But I think there's so much that's interesting there. So I was really interested in the fact that you showed appreciations and what you thought you might get out of that. And just some of the thinking, Ben, on what kind of relationships you wanted to explore. Because I think we're at this cusp of moving from, oh, well, who's connected to whom and who are you connected through, to how can I use this to build relationships, right? And I wanted to, it seems to me that you're kind of thinking in this direction. How can we use these tools to kind of start unteasing the relationships? And also have a follow-up question. Maybe this is for you, Christine. There's something about the Kumu algorithm that kind of shows when you show this huge circle, right? And the old maps kind of started to separate out the clusters. And I really like that. But there's this kind of, densifying into the center that doesn't show the clusters as well. And I wondered if that's a Kumu algorithm thing. Yeah. So those are the two questions I have.
Yeah. I'll just answer the second one first quickly. So Ben, you can talk about the first one if it's still in your head, but yeah, that's a Kumu thing. I wish it were different, but the way Kumu's algorithms work, it's all around a central thing. You can try to run, there's a communities function that will color clusters differently, but the way that algorithm is designed, it doesn't work very well if the network is already fairly dense. It doesn't really show you anything. You could try, we made it so that some app data can go into Graph Commons, which is a totally different visualization platform. And Graph Commons uses that layout, it has a different algorithm and a different community detection that works much better, which is why we made it that way, because Drew Mackey who's been doing this for a long time, uses Graph Commons a lot. And so we made it so that the output doesn't go live, because that's not a function of Graph Commons, but it's regrettable. I wish it were the old school, it would spread out further and not just keep sort of pulling into the center, but it does, which annoys me. But it is what it is. Beyond my control. Sorry. So back to your first question and Ben's response, if that's, do you need her to refresh your memory?
Well, I think what I heard was, a shared interest in how we can use these tools to deepen and expand the collaborative relationships that we have, not just show the ones that previously existed. And I'm not quite sure what to say beyond what I said previously about that. I mean, I think, can you just say, is there something more particular that you're wondering about, maybe?
Well, I love the appreciations, and I could see that, what happens with that, if I don't know if the person getting the appreciation received any notice, but to me, that would be kind of like, a dopamine hit, if I knew that, and encouraging people to do that, because that's a relationship building piece. And then, there were some others that I, saw either through the survey forms or something that says, I'd like to learn more about this, or there's some questions that I think you asked that were really interesting in regard to the relationships itself. And I wondered if that was, you were trying to tease that out, or you thought about that, how that might work, you know, incite more intentional collaboration, as you say?
Yeah, well, that was definitely the purpose of those questions about people saying they want to know more, or we were explicitly saying, you know, I want to have a one-on-one conversation with you was an option.
Mhm.
Small group conversation with you, again, going back to that idea. In addition to these open Zoom calls and asynchronous tools, organizing lots of live small groups that are more targeted.
Mhm.
That's the goal of this work. So we're still working now, you know, to continue energizing that, including encouraging people to look at the map and see if anybody was pointing to them and saying, hey, I want to connect with you. And certainly some of us, I mean, I'm paying attention to that data, and I think other people are. So it's a matter of are getting into the habit of that. I think the weavers can help with that as well. And people, you know, starting to make more of that visible as it happens, so that we develop a culture of that within the community practice that's emerging. The appreciations are a little different because they're more of an evaluation in a way, a retrospective on what happened. And yes, a kind of a little dopamine hit. So they have both that personal level of just a nice thing to do. But I think making it public, you know, so that other people can see
Mhm.
appreciations are happening, has value in a number of ways. The idea of doing it actually came out of an inquiry, I don't know, a year or so ago with the social system mapping community practice around what are the things we can do to help map trust in the network? And the sense was we can't just ask that straight up, especially because you don't want people to map that they don't.
Mhm.
That would just not be generative. But
Mhm.
have a group where there's a lot of appreciation flowing, that's probably a good
Mhm.
that group, you know, has trust built into it and is functional in those ways. So that was sort of the inspiration for doing it. And it just became, I wound up sort of calling it a love map view, you know, and as a and it just makes me happy to see it. I think the last thing I'll say, to me, there's been a whole shift for me in what these maps are mostly for, from the big picture visualizing of what's going on, which is absolutely powerful and important. You know, like for an event like this,
Mhm.
you know, you look at it and you say, wow, you know, there's 1,000 people and 200 organizations, and look at all this,
Mhm.
all this. So that has a macro level impact. And I think the deepest potential by far, the most powerful potential, is at the micro level, the mycelial level, to use that metaphor that we used a lot in the summit. That's where, when people are taking all this time to put in that information, or to draw a connection between you and me and say, I want to meet you, and here's why, right? They don't just say, I want to have a one-on-one conversation, but ideally they put a few sentences in about, I see that you're involved in such and
Mhm.
doing this. And, you know, it's
Mhm.
just, in a way that, you know, you wouldn't need the map. If you just had that person's contact information, they could send an email and do it. But I think the fact that we're mapping it matters. I think it does something to the field, and to us personally, to be showing those connections and engaging in that way.
Yeah.
Well, and engaging in the map to answer that question, to see your result as soon as you type it in, pop into the map. You know, I think it goes to what Vicky was saying about the dopamine hits, or as you called it, the love network. It's flowing, you know, and it's flowing by the activity of typing and thinking about appreciations and being appreciated. And you wouldn't get that with one-offs email, or like, please say something nice about this person, or you know,
Yeah.
it's a different, it lowers the bar of engagement and jacks it up, it seems like. This was amazing. You've taken this to a new place. Flourish.
Yeah.
I loved it too, Ben. Is there a link? Is this public information, did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to show this to my partner here so that we can get some ideas.
Could you put both are you putting the platform you embedded it in? That would be great for us as well. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I see you, Justin. I just want to add a little bit to Vicky, your question. So when in our context, when we're together and we're talking about sense making, I think that's like learning how to actually take this data and really mine it, for want of a better word, but really utilize it and look at it from lots of different angles is a skill that, I mean, Ben has started out with sort of an organic, natural, really deep capacity to do sense making with the social system map. And that, I think, the more we ourselves are developing a methodology and a skill around doing that sense making. So that's like my abbreviated word for what you're talking about, is how do we really use this to generate more capacity with all of us? And we're just barely scratching the surface. And the majority of network members, in my experience, don't have an innate sense to do like that. That just doesn't dawn on a lot of people. And that's a thing for us to help develop and help sort of ripple out to other, more broadly, so that it's not just the Ben in the network who's doing, some really deep, valuable sense making, but there's a number of people like that. The Weavers are doing it, and the, a lot of people are doing it to help amplify the potential from all their different perspectives. That, so when I'm referring to sense making, I'm referring more to that. Then I think some people think I'm talking about analysis, like data analysis, and data analysis is not that interesting to me. It's more about how do we actually make the capacity to use these spread further. But Justin, yeah.
That's a really good segue. And so I come in as essentially the department head for a municipality's youth and family department. And serve primarily as a coordinating entity in our community. And so we're trying to embark on a 5 to 10 year strategic plan on helping our young people not just kind of get through COVID, but beyond it, and how do we mitigate kind of the long-term impact of a pandemic on a society of children. And so, a lot of prongs to this work. Obviously, it's really complicated and involves lots of sectors. And so I'm fascinated by this work. I don't understand it. Right. I have a background in public policy. I have a background in administration, and this level of kind of analysis and connective work. I know enough to know what I don't know. And I know that's a lot of things. And so as a novice who either wants to get into social systems mapping and have us really get a grasp on what's available in finding ways to connect, I think we've had this kind of burgeoning idea of people reach out to those they know and they trust to get information, but those that they trust and know aren't the ones who are expert in how to navigate a particular field. And I see a lot of utility in finding ways to connect folks in a lot of different ways, but the teaching myself a new skill at this level of magnitude, and even just playing in some of these things, feels wildly overwhelming. And for good cause, because it's very technical and skill-based. And so how does one start? What should be those entry-level steps in trying to get a handle on this, from your opinion?
This is the perennial question, and I'm wondering if somebody who has gotten a start would prefer to, I mean, as the person who developed the key tool set, half of the key tool set and the vision of it, I don't know where to start because I've been working on it for a long time. I'm at the deep end of the pool.
Fair.
Jim or Ben or Cindy, comments? Mary?
My connection to mapping has always been more intuitive, and this sense of potential and abundance and source of creativity and innovation. And so my journey is going from the intuitive to knowing more. But how I worked with it was to work with someone who was technically capable of creating the maps, and I worked on the other end of the survey and the people, and we worked together. So I still don't know technically, all of those things. It's still, challenging at times. But what's important is the connection, the people, the relationship connection. And you have a great deal of value in being sort of seated in that world and that connection. And you can seek to work with find a technical person, which there are in this community, with the same values, that understands what it is you're trying to do and what questions, not the generic questions of the survey, but what would be important questions related to your community and the age of those that you're working with. And it could be working with youth. They would take to mapping a lot more quickly than older adults. So it could be very exciting.
I got to jump off. I was going to add just one quick sentence or paragraph. Yeah, as Mary says, I think there's a lot of moving parts, a lot of different hats that, as Christine says, Ben wears them all simultaneously and does them really well. But I don't think that's sustainable. I don't think that's an entry point, for someone like you. I think that those skills exist within this community, and we're starting to try to figure out like how to make them visible, and then perhaps engage people in collaborations, either voluntarily or through pay or whatever, so that we can do these things together and people can learn as a community of practice how to do a particular skill and do it with someone and build something together. So I think that's a potential right there. I think a big stumbling block for many of us is the Kumu side of creating the views. The SumApp side is more intuitive and so forth. So I think we need to jack that up a bit. And I'll just say, looking at Ben's code for the Kumu stuff, this is it's fairly simple what you've got here for everything you've done. I'm super inspired by the simplicity that you've got going here. And so that engages me. But really getting over the hump of somebody that can look at the Kumu side would make a big difference, I think. But I've loved this, Ben. This is a great presentation, super inspiring. I got to jump. I'm sorry, but I'll look at the recording.
One thing I found, in my own learning,
Really beautiful.
I just got in there and messed around. I started out working with Jim, who just left, and he was the person in the role that Mary was naming, of kind of taking on the technical side of things so that I could get something up and running. And it took me a while to get over the hump of thinking, oh, I can even mess with this and not cause damage, even though Jim showed me how to create like alternate views in Kumu where I could work with the code, and it was just my own little sandbox kind of thing. But at a certain point, I realized, wait a minute, there's something I want to know, and I've got the data, and I'll bet I can make a view for that. And it turned out it wasn't hard. And so just getting in there, messing around, it's a lot of little things, but there's only a few things that are really complex. And that's where also having Christine and her husband, Tim, have been an unbelievably, valuable resource. So whenever I get stuck, I can go to them and say, hey, what's going on? And, usually within like an hour, I've got an answer, or 24 hours. And it's something that's fairly straightforward because they know the answer. So it's 5 or 10 minutes for them, hopefully. And of course you can hire them to do this for you. It is a big part of what they do. So if your town's got a budget, at least that's always an option.
No, that's great. You know, and I think that we have a mayor who's very much behind some of this visioning, which means we may also have a budget to kind of support the work.
Cool. And just one last piece of that, we have developed a lot of resources. They're not super greatly organized, and I mean, but there is a wealth of stuff out there that if you're able to dig a little bit, and Kara will send a follow-up email that will have links to help you get started. But I think the key thing that you just heard from everybody is collaboration and learning together and getting support and not feeling like you have to do it all yourself or figure it out yourself or that you're in it alone, because none of us can keep being that way. So
You're me, Justin. I'm in Newtown.
see, there you go.
I met someone through the summit in Middletown too, a guy named Zoe Farnsworth, who I don't know, maybe I should connect you to just
Maybe we should map it.
right? They're on the map. I think by day. So look Zoe up on the map.
And also put yourself on our community of practice map, because that gives you an interface to engage with, to get comfortable with and understand how it works. And you can copy some of the code, and you can just, and plus then you'll see who else you might want to connect with. So we're at the bottom of the hour. Is there any burning one last comment anybody wants to make before we say goodbye?
It was a great presentation, and I really appreciate, what you brought.
Thanks so much.
I just am always impressed with Ben's creativity and his innate pushing the boundaries and playing and coming up with new stuff. It's you're our Picasso of the.
Here's Justin, I'm going to put Zoe's link on the map there in case you want to check them out. Very interesting person.
Okay, thank you all. Have a wonderful day. We can all unmute and do our goodbye ritual here as well. So 3, 2, 1. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.